wasn't wrong. Do you remember when they closed all the gyms and the churches and the small businesses for your safety, but left open fast food stores and big box corporate stores and liquor stores because they were essential? Do you remember how when the kids did eventually go back to school but had to wear masks, but were told that they could play their full contact sports, but they had to wear masks during those sports in order to keep themselves safe? Do you remember that? Do you remember telling people how ridiculous that was? Remember how you tried to tell people and all you got in return was called names and shunned from society? Remember how confused you were in the beginning? It was like a switch flipped, and everyone around you suddenly had what you now know is called the fluoride stare. Just overnight, people who had the most common sense, just everyday normal people, now suddenly were fighting people in Target because those other people weren't wearing masks. Do you remember that? Remember how fucking gobsmacked you were? Do you remember how when you finally did find people who thought like you did, who understood how this whole thing just seemed really, really off, but they were too afraid to stand up with you because they did not want to be publicly shamed? Too weak, so they just agreed with the masses in order to avoid that uncomfortable conversation or confrontation. Do you remember that? Do you remember the moment that it first dawned on you how quickly people would line up to protect the very system that was blatantly lying to them about everything to begin with? How absolutely vile and horrific those people got. But then do you remember when the next variant came? And it was a little less. And then when the next variant came, it was a little less. And then when the next variant came, it was almost nobody. It was almost like watching a garden blossom. Slowly but surely, all of the flowers started to open. Remember when it was understood that newest variant, latest variant wasn't going to work? And so they immediately switched to the war in Ukraine within 24 hours. And it took a few minutes, but the people eventually caught on and they started to revolt. They started to push back. When the Ukraine narrative started to fall apart, they went straight after Israel. And that took a little longer, but eventually we got there. We revolted for various different reasons, but revolted all the same. Do you remember how they're trying to scare everybody with the bird flu? How it was being spread to cows and then spread to people, and how your meat could be contaminated? People went out and bought chickens. They supplied themselves, their families, and their communities with eggs and chicken. They're actively doing it now. There's a whole side of TikTok dedicated to it. Remember by the end of this, when all big pharma was exposed for who they really are and what it was really about and who was getting paid and how much per jab, it trickled down from the vid to other medications. People are actively advocating for themselves when it comes to the things that they need medically. They're not just blindly following along. They're reading through side effects thoroughly. Who makes the medication, how much money they make, what other things that company's invested in. Remember in the beginning when everybody was screaming about Save the Children? And now Hollywood's fallen, and every single person in this country is fully aware of the problems that we have in regards to human and child trafficking, whether they believed the conspiracies or not. They are aware. And how that made victims of child and human trafficking comfortable enough to come out and share their stories and to seek help, which in turn then helped other victims of human and child trafficking. Do you remember when I told you the story about the Federal Reserve and how it was created during the height of typhoid fever? Now the dollar is failing. The very thing that keeps us a slave to the establishment. There are lots of rumors that it's now going to be backed by gold and silver again. I'm not wrong. It's just slow. And my biggest fear is that not everybody is going to make it to the end. But better days are coming. I'm not wrong.